Brothers and sisters of the sacred junk, welcome to the Burning Hand of Friendship, a channel devoted to the relics of pop culture that scrambled our brains and the physical media that built the mythos of a new age. And I am your host, Friendo number 2, the conscientious vampire, and the movie guy for the Burning Hand of Friendship. And as you can see, we have another movie haul. But this time I burned all my money in the bonfire of cinema known as Kino Lober, who recently had a pretty big sale, which I did partake. And I also grabbed some Kino movies on Amazon, the great Satan of e-commerce, because they had such nice prices and I couldn't resist the 25% coupons these had, so don't judge me, okay? But anyways, there are a lot of treasures in this episode, so let us begin without any further delay. And we start things off with Archangel from a 1990, directed by one of my favorite artsy-fartsy Canadian directors, Guy Maddin. I even spoke about one of his movies, The Saddest Music in the World. It's in one of my boutique label Dream Release videos if you want to check it out. But this is one of his earlier movies and one I have not seen. All I know is that it is a surreal dark comedy that takes place in Russia during the war with the Bolsheviks. And you have a soldier with amnesia who is looking for his lost love in a village which he thinks he needs to defend from the Bolsheviks. And it looks like an old-timey movie because that is what Guy Maddin is really known for, creating surreal and dreamy movies that look like they were shot in the 1920s or earlier, you know. The technique, the sound, and editing all emulate, the early days of cinema. But Guy Maddin has been also compared to David Lynch, which I have to say that Maddin is much more of an art house guy, as David Lynch was able to break into the mainstream. Even though his movies are still considered to be esoteric by some, but he was able to get some commercial success, you know what I'm saying? But what they both have in common, I have to say, is that they have their own unique voice, and when it's one of their movies. If you've seen one of their movies, they have their own language, they have their own style, and you know it's them. And, I really can't wait to check this one out, because I've never seen it. Oh, and I have to mention that it's a 4K transfer, so. Next, we have Salvation. Have you said your prayers today? Directed by Beth B., who is a very cool lady and was involved in the no-wave underground scene in New York during the late 70s. And with her partner Scott B., they made some really subversive art punk movies. They even made a film with Lydia Lunch, who was one of the cornerstones of the no-wave musical scene. And just in case you don't know, no wave was an American post-punk movement. Basically, it was the antithesis of the commercialized punk and new wave music of the time. But anyway, this was one of Beth's first commercial movies, and I believe Kino has a collection of her more punk rock DIY movies. Now, I've never actually seen this movie, and the reviews on IMDb are not kind.
We were in agreement on Salvation, the TV evangelist psychosexual thriller. 2 more thumbs down.
But I do have a long history with this film's soundtrack, and as you can see, I found this record at a thrift store back in the 90s, and had never heard of the movie when I found it, but I knew everything about New Order and Cabaret Voltaire, some of the musicians in this band, because they were my favorites during my gothic and industrial era. And at the time, this record had New Order tracks that weren't available anywhere else up until the late 2000s, when the New Order deluxe editions of the album started coming out, and some of the songs showed up as bonus tracks. But that is my history with the soundtrack, and why I'm not really worried that I might hate this movie. As I love collecting bad movies with cool soundtracks, I am very forgiving to a movie if it keeps my ears entertained. But what I do know is that Xena Zervanka from the punk band X, a very important band for the Los Angeles punk scene at the time, And the band I appreciate as well. I love their first two albums. But she plays a singer in a heavy metal Christian band, I shit you not. And you also get the Viggo Mortensen, obviously much younger before his days as Aragorn. And from what I've seen in the trailers and clips, the camera work and lighting look like neon heaven. Very cool. Now, this movie might rub people in the wrong way since it's a dark comedy about religion. But it mostly takes aim at the televangelists who, let's be honest, were a problem in the 80s with all their satanic panic they were pushing about heavy metal music and their ridiculous holy war against Dungeons and Dragons. They even had their own TV channels manipulating old people into sending them money, for Christ's sake. But let's not get into that, you know? But for this movie, I'm going in with low expectations and I'm just viewing it as a time capsule, you know. I want to hear some cool tunes, bathe in the neon lights, and see if any of the comedy still lands. Either way, I'm happy to have a Beth B movie in the archive. And next, we have The Bounty from a 1984, directed by Roger Donaldson. And he directed a cool little movie back in 1977 called Sleeping Dogs with a young Sam Neill, which I highly recommend. But he's probably better known for Cocktail with Tom Cruise and my personal favorite, Species, you know, the horror movie with the alien lady. But as for The Bounty, I saw this when I was too young, so nostalgia weighs in a bit too much here, because I do love this movie, but now that I rewatched it, you know, it could have been much better. To start things off on a positive note, the cinematography on this is a top-notch. The look and set designs are immersive. All the actors are great. You really buy into their characters, especially with the talents of Anthony Hopkins, Mel Gibson, Daniel Day-Lewis, and Sir Laurence Olivier making an appearance as well. Now, for the bad part, as much as I'm a fan of Vangelis, and I absolutely love the intro and end credits of this movie, I feel like the music is a bit of a mismatch, as those songs sound more like a music for a steamy, erotic thriller, even though there is some eroticism in this, but we'll get to that in a second. But overall, the score doesn't quite work here. It really should have leaned more traditional, especially during the Cape Horn sequence where the music kind of jolts you out of the film, you know. But, you know, again, that's me nitpicking, you know, because I do love Vangelis. I just don't feel that the score really matched well with this, but, you know, some may disagree. Also, as much as I love seeing all the nudity in this as a kid, because let me tell you, for a PG movie, there's a lot of boobies in here, especially when they reach Tahiti. But like I said, watching it now, it just feels a little bit too much, you know, a little ridiculous. It comes off almost like a high-end Skinamax movie with all the boobies. But don't get me wrong, it's still an enjoyable retelling, but the heavy focus on Booby Island kind of hurts the film's credibility, especially with Anthony Hopkins narrating the story to the court. You know, because if he's recounting these events and arguing that he lost control of his men because of all the island's boobies, you know, realistically, probably he would have been hung for failing to maintain discipline. But, you know, again, me nitpicking here, because I still like it. You know, it's a very 80s period piece, if anything. Next, we have two movies by the same director, Fernando De Leo, with Caliber 9 and The Italian Connection. Now, in the world of cult cinema, these are known as poliziotteschi films or spaghetti action films, you know, like a spaghetti western since they are Italian productions. So expect over-the-top action and a lot of style. And I actually had the Fernando De Leo DVD box set that Kino also released, and it included these movies and two more. But I ended up selling it during COVID because I was moving around a lot and I was digitizing all my movies when I thought, you know what, I'm getting rid of all of my physical media and look at me, I'm back. So these are upgrades for me, and I'll probably end up grabbing the others that were in the box set, like The Boss, which is also very good, and Shoot First, Die Later. But these two, in my opinion, are his best, and a solid place to start if you've never seen a poliziotteschi film. But like I said earlier, these are very stylistic gangster films, usually with a jazzy, funky score. And you know I love the funky jazz. And honestly, Italians in the 70s and early 80s had some of the best film scores, not to mention Ennio Morricone. And I also got to mention Henry Silva, who shows up in The Italian Connection and is also the lead in the movie The Boss. But I didn't realize just how many cult films he's been in, like Alligator, Buck Rogers, Megaforce, Escape from the Bronx, which is also, an Italian production. He was even in the Dick Tracy movie, which, that's also a guilty pleasure. But the list goes on. So if his mug looks familiar, you've probably seen him in a movie, as he is definitely a cult cinema icon. But either way, I'm excited to have these two back in the archive. Next, we have Nightmare City from a 1980, directed by Umberto Lenzi, who I have to mention, he also directed a good polizioteschi film called Manhunt, which is worth pursuing. But this one is a low-budget zombie trash movie, which I didn't know Kino had released it until I saw it on their sale, but it is under the sub-label Raro, which is also the sub-label that put out the Fernando De Leo movies for Kino. But yet again, I have to mention that this has a very cool soundtrack, this time with veteran composer Stelvio Cipriani, who has done music for spaghetti westerns, giallo soundtracks, and he did a couple of scores for Mario Bava as well. And Death Waltz did a cool reissue of the soundtrack back in 2021, which you can still find at a reasonable price, but it's almost out of print, all right? But back to the movie. Here we're dealing with toxic cannibal zombies, and they are different than traditional zombies as they can run, which was controversial at the time, but, they did it way before 28 Days Later. But, here we have a whole city infected with them, so it gets very gory, and also plenty of schlock to make it entertaining. And even though the movie kind of falls apart halfway through, it's still an enjoyable Italo zombie film, and very happy to bring it into the collection. And this one I could not resist for a $9.99, and it came with a slipcover. And this is The Boogans, which I love saying, by the way, The Boogans. I can't stop. But this is from a 1981, directed by James L. Conway. And he worked mostly in television. He directed some Star Trek episodes, Smallville, Supernatural, and oh yeah, not to mention the Grizzly Adams. But I have not seen these movies since the VHS era, so it's been some time. But I do remember liking this. It is a well put together creature feature. Definitely a B-plus movie. It gets a lot of comparisons to Jaws on the internet because the kill shots are mostly POV until we get to the grand reveal, at the end. But, I have to say that in The Boogans, the reveal is a bit more surprising, let's say. And James L. Conway, let's be honest, he is no Steven Spielberg, but he still manages to do a decent job here. But either way, this movie is a unique one, and the characters are actually likable. And if you don't go in with big expectations, you will have a fun time with this. Definitely add to your watch list if you're into 80s horror. And it also kind of works like a slasher, but instead, you have an underground dwelling monster doing all the killing. Now this one is a favorite, another one from the VHS era. I'm Madman from a 1989, directed by Tibor Takacs, who also did another personal favorite, The Gate. The movie with a little Stephen Dorff who accidentally opens a portal to hell. But this one is a supernatural slasher where the killer literally jumps out of the pages of a pulp horror book. And the blonde lady who reads the book, she is played by Jenny Wright, who I honestly had a crush on back then. And some of you may remember her from the best 1980s vampire movie, Near Dark. And she was also in the Pink Floyd The Wall movie, not the record. But this is another unique horror film, a little bit better than B+, I would say. It has style, and it plays homage to a lot of classic horror and film noir. with Easter eggs if you're into pulp fiction. And I mean the actual pulp books, not the movie by Quentin Tarantino. But anyway, happy to finally have this in the collection. And now we start with the 4K. The first 4K is The Marathon Man from a 1976, directed by John Schlesinger, the dude who directed The Midnight Cowboy, which also had Dustin Hoffman in the film. And in the 1980s, he directed The Falcon and the Snowman and the corresponding music video with David Bowie and Pat Metheny, which I'm a big fan of that theme song more than I like the movie. And he also did The Believers. It's one of the first Santeria horror films of the 80s. It wasn't great, but definitely worth the watch. But this one is a 1970s stone cold classic. You know what I'm saying? One of the best conspiracy thrillers. Like, if there was a Mount Rushmore of 70s thrillers, this would be next to Three Nights of the Condor, All the President's Men, and The Conversation, probably. I have to really think about what would belong there, but this would be one of them. And basically, you have a guy who gets caught up in Nazi shenanigans after his shady brother is killed, and you have shadowy men following him, a psychopathic dentist, and Rob Schneider, so you know it's going to be good. And this is peak 70s cinema, if you ask me, so definitely worth it in the 4K, and put it in your watch list if you have not seen it. And this one reminds me of my papa, as he would let me see a lot of rated R action movies when I was younger. He even took me to see Revenge of the Ninja when I was only 8 years old, which, believe you me, I was a little too young for that, especially in the very beginning when that little kid gets the Chinese star right in the head. I felt a little queasy after that. But the Vice Squad from a 1982 was on a completely different level, and I think my papa regretted that I saw that one, and if I'm honest, I probably regret seeing this so young, so I got it in the 4K. But this was directed by Gary Sherman, who also directed the cult classic Dead and Buried, which is a pretty good movie. But he also did Poltergeist 3, which was a pretty bad movie. But the Vice Squad is a totally different animal. It's gritty, trashy, and it gave me plenty to talk about with my little friends the next day at school. Cause this is ultra 80s sleaze exploitation with hookers, a violent pimp named Ramrod, and a loose cannon detective who uses live bait when trying to capture the predator. And its violence is harsh, uncomfortable, and unforgiving, all while being drenched in a beautiful, cool-looking neon lights. So I can't wait to relive it in the 4K. And I almost forgot to mention the cool slipcover. I'm such a sucker for a slipcover. Next we have Danger Diabolique from a 1968, directed by one of my favorites, Mario Bava. And it has a slipcover. And it's a kitschy cult classic based on a Euro comic book from the Silver Age, featuring a hero who really isn't a hero but a stylish thief with gadgets, giving off a super anti-hero vibe. It's heavy on the 60s pop art and modish aesthetics because visually it almost looks like the Batman TV show getting mashed up with the James Bond. And I wouldn't doubt that Michael Myers took some notes from this when making the Austin Power movies. But here you get the real deal package with a groovy soundtrack by Ennio Morricone, ridiculously stylish cinematography, and it practically makes you want a martini in hand while watching, because this is exactly what would be playing in a swinging space-age bachelor pad. In other words, Mario Bava delivers pure 1960s eye candy with a colorful, sexy, loungy vibe. I highly recommend, and happy to finally have this in the collection. And this is the last 4K I grabbed from the Kino Sale, and I was so lucky it came with its slipcover. And this is Scars of Dracula from a 1970, produced by Hammer Films, which you know I absolutely love. And this is their 6th Dracula film with Christopher Lee, and it is the bloodiest of the franchise. And it was directed by Roy Ward Baker, who has done a few Hammer films, notably The Gender-Bending Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, The Vampire Lovers, which was a sexier vampire movie and inspired Jess Franco to do Vampiro Lesbos, which is an exploitative vampire movie. And he also directed The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, which is a fantastical cult favorite and was produced, or shall I say co-produced, with the Shaw brothers. But Scars of Dracula is pretty much a straight-up vampire film, which was trying to reboot the Dracula franchise for the new era. It doesn't really get that much love as the previous Dracula films, but it is still a lot of fun, beautifully shot. You do get a couple of schlocky moments, like don't get me started with the bats in the movie. But Christopher Lee kicks ass, and it's one of the first R-rated Hammer films next to its prequel, Taste the Blood of Dracula, which I think Scars of Dracula is still a little better than that one. But if you love Christopher Lee as Dracula, this is a must-watch. Highly recommend. I'm so happy to bring it into the collection. And now I will quickly go through some of the other Kino movies I found on Amazon. But the first one I grabbed was Play Misty for Me in 4K from a 1971, directed by Clint Eastwood. And this is a cool little chiller thriller that I had not seen up until COVID. And it kind of surprised me. It has a Hitchcock horror vibe. And I really did not expect to like it so much. So I highly recommend this one. And the next one I grabbed was The Dust Devil, also in 4K from a 1992, directed by crazy man Richard Stanley. You know, the guy who did Hardware and was fired from the island of Dr. Moreau. I also have to mention the Simon Boswell score in this, which I really like. Now, this one I saw in the theater back in the day, and I did not like it. But when they released the final cut with the missing pieces, my opinion quickly changed, since it was obvious that the studio butchered the movie in editing for its theatrical release. But with the reconstructed version, you get a very stylish horror film. It's also very violent, because you're following a demon who is roaming South Africa and going on a killing spree so he can get himself back into hell, and I will leave it at that. And next is A Violent City from a 1970, directed by Sergio Solima, who did some very cool spaghetti westerns in the past, like The Big Gun Down and Run Man Run, not to mention his classic Poliziotteschi, Revolver with Oliver Reed, which I highly recommend. But The Violent City is more of a Italo-crime neo-noir thriller with Charlie Bronson, who plays an anti-hero. He's an assassin, and Telly Savalas as his nemesis. And this is a revenge flick in its bare bones, but a bit of a slow burn, and it could probably have used a little more violence, but all is forgiven by me, as it has an excellent score by Ennio Morricone, and the ending does deliver. And then the very last one I got was Eyes of Laura Mars, and this is also a Blu-ray. I'm not sure if there's a 4K, but I really don't need this movie in a 4K. And this is from a 1978, directed by Irvin Kershner, you know, the dude who directed Empire Strikes Back. And this one is based on a story by John Carpenter. This is one of his first scripts, and it's a cool 70s thriller that is a little off the mark, but done with capable hands. And if you like to immerse yourself in 70s nostalgia, disco dancing, psychics, and murder, then this might be your cup of coffee. And that is all I have for the crazy Kino haul. And if the spirit of Mario Bava moved you, bless that like button and tap subscribe to seal your place among the initiated.